Good morning. I'm going to give it, as usual, a minute or two just to see who else logs on. Um, so, hoping to see a little bit more, but feel free to comment. I'd like to see some interaction today if we can. If you don't have an account and you want to ask a question, you can email me, and when I see my number in my inbox go up, then I'll know that maybe I've gotten an email from you. So I'll check. But feel free to comment, ask questions. We are going to finish the chapter out today. So today we're talking about crime and punishment. Hey Shayna, what's up? Welcome to the class. Um, so we're going to finish out the chapter on crime, talking about crime and punishment. What's up, Elijah? That's right, quiz tomorrow. Elijah knows what's up. It's almost like it's in class, and I say we're finishing a chapter, so boom, Elijah beat me to it. Good work. Good morning, Milena. This is exciting. I'm working in a Zoom classroom right now. The downside is not being able, or not very easily being able to save and upload video from that as easily as this. But I'd like to do a live stream at least once a week with Zoom coming up. But I'm still pending my approval. But anyway, good morning, all. We've got a quiz tomorrow. Quiz is going to be on deviance and also on social controls to combat deviance. What's up, Alexa? All right. We're going to get started today now. So we're talking about crime, and your book gives a definition of crime. So I'm just going to roll with that. And they define in your book crime as a deviant behavior that violates a law. So something isn't necessarily a crime by definition. People working with drills at your house. I know how it is. I've got two little kids, and sometimes they're doing stuff in the halls while I'm live streaming or recording videos. It gets a little loud. All right, so it's difficult to be a crime if there's not a law that's being violated. So that's how crime generally works. Now we can say something's immoral or something's unethical, and there are immoral or unethical things that occur that don't violate laws. But in order to be a crime, it's to violate law, and there has to be some enforcement in place or some punishment in place that is a response to a crime. And so your book points out types of crime. So there's property crime, and property crime would be things like vandalism, for example. There's violent crime, that would be assault, for example, like simple assault, aggravated assault, assault and battery, assault with a deadly weapon, all these things. Those would be examples of violent crime. Violent crime is usually something harmful against a person. There are public order crimes, so drug usage would be a public order crime, or disorderly conduct would be a public order crime. And then there's white collar crime, and white collar crime would be something usually involving money. So insider trading, tax evasion would be examples of white collar crime. Your book also talks about hate crime. I think hate crimes usually fall into one of these categories. Bernie Madoff, exactly. Bernie Madoff would be white collar crime. It's a Ponzi scheme. Um, yeah. Uh, I just saw something. I forget the article. I just saw an article about Bernie Madoff, and he was making a comment from prison. Um, I don't know if it was Corona related or not, but I think he was mad because someone else was committing a similar crime but not getting a similar punishment. Yeah, I remember Bernie Madoff. That would be an excellent example of white collar crime. All right. So anyway, as far as hate crimes are concerned, hate crimes are usually some kind of violent crime or public order crime that is based on race or national origin or beliefs or something like that. I mean, there's a huge list that would classify something as a hate crime, but usually they fall into one of these categories. All right, questions or comments up to this point? Okay, so crime rates. if you watch the news, it would seem that crime rates are going up, but that's actually not true. Crime rates have been declining really since the 90s. Late 80s, early 90s, crime rates have been declining pretty steadily, and violent crime rates are down, property crime rates are down. In general, the overall crime rate has decreased dramatically from what it was in the 1980s. So while it may look like crime rates are going up, crime rates actually have decreased. It's just a matter of media coverage of it that makes us think that it's getting worse. Okay, now your book gets into rationales for punishment because if there's a crime, generally if the individual is caught, they are punished, and they're punished by society through the legal representatives, whether initially law enforcement, so police would arrest and investigate, and then they'd be prosecuted by a prosecuting attorney, and then a judge would deliver their sentence after the people, meaning the jury, would rule whether that person is innocent or guilty. And so then that person who committed a crime would be punished. And there are goals associated with punishment. Now, I think sometimes the goals or the rationales for punishment, it's not just one of these. It can be a combination of these that we use in society. But one rationale for punishment is retribution. So that would be, for example, like if someone murders somebody else, all right, punishment for that person would be retribution, like justice for that person. That was justice for the person that was murdered by means of retribution against the person that did the murdering. Another rationale for punishment would be rehabilitation, where maybe you're hoping to get the individual that committed the crime off of that mindset and out of that lifestyle and help them become, after they serve their time, a good, productive member of society. So that could be a rationale for punishment. Deterrence is a third rationale for punishment. How do you stop other people from committing a crime? You show that the punishment for the crime is not worth the crime that's committed. So, for example, people that deal drugs, they can face a very, very stiff penalty, like sometimes up to 20 years in prison. And while they may deal drugs because either they are hooked on drugs and they get free drugs from the people that are suppliers, or because of the money, where they think I'm going to get rich quick or whatever, the goal is to deter people from that activity by showing them the punishment for that activity is not worth whatever they're getting out of it. So retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence. A fourth would be protection. There are some individuals, sociopaths and psychopaths, that are just generally dangerous people, and they don't really have a conscience per se, and they don't really care about hurting other people. And protecting society by imprisoning these people is a motive for punishment. Some people are just too dangerous to be out on the streets. Think like serial killers, for example. We wouldn't attempt to rehabilitate a serial killer because they've shown a pattern of very dangerous behavior. Okay, the fifth is restoration, and this would kind of be like, in a way, it's similar to rehabilitation. But those would be the goals or rationales for punishment. And I think there can be a combination like deterrence and rehabilitation, or deterrence, retribution, and rehabilitation. I don't think it's as clear cut just one of these rationales for punishment uh, at any given time in any given person. Like if you ask several people why should we punish crime, they're probably going to say several of these reasons, or at least think several of these reasons. All right. We pause for questions or comments. Refresh my email really quickly to make sure no one that doesn't have a channel didn't email in a question. Okay. So now let's see here. Aha, it's a great question. For sociopaths, why isn't capital punishment used? Um, this will be my take. I'm not saying this is why. I think there are two main reasons um, why capital punishment isn't used. So one reason is that I think just in general as a society, we've gotten a lot softer on crime and on criminals. Um, I, I'll give you an example. Okay, so there was a famous mobster that was gunned down in a gunfight with police around East Liverpool, Ohio. And they emptied the schools, like the grade schools, and they brought. Now this is going to sound graphic because it is, but they brought the kids from the schools to see this man's dead body, and they said, "This is what happens when you take to a life of crime." Right? And the expectation was if you become a violent mobster, you might die in a gunfight, and that's just what you've earned. Today, we take I think a much more compassionate view of crime and criminals, and we tend to think that it's just not right to take a life no matter what. Um, So now, yeah, Shayna, I'll get to your point because I think that's a very solid point. I think what Elijah's talking about is sociopaths that have committed crimes, and what we're talking about here is in the context of someone who's a dangerous criminal. Um, and I'll get to Melina too. Good questions, guys. I love this. So I think one reason is that we're soft on criminals. The other reason is there's always the argument of, and it happens. What if the person is actually innocent? And once you execute an innocent person, and if you find out they were the wrong person 30 years later, you can't let them out of jail because they're dead, right? If you find out they're the wrong person 2 years later, you can't let them out of jail because they're dead, right? So I think those are the two reasons why we don't use capital punishment. And even right now, our capital punishment system is really terrible. I mean, if you're using it as deterrence, what's the point of deterrence uh, if you get to spend 30 years on death row before you're executed? Like, so you get to live another 30 years. That doesn't really seem to be a deterrent for crime. But back in the earlier days of capital punishment, you had, depending upon where it was, in the 1800s, you might have weeks to appeal, or in the 1900s, you might have a couple months to appeal. But I think that capital punishment just isn't very effective as a deterrent. What it does do, and I think I'm going to Shane, let me answer your question, then I want to address Melena's question. Yeah, if they have a disorder but haven't acted violently, I think yeah, we shouldn't. We lock people up, whether it's in a mental institution or in a jail. We lock people up or institutionalize them for two reasons. One is that they've shown that they're a danger to themselves, or the other is that they have shown that they're a danger to others. Those are the reasons why people are committed to mental institutions, and those would also be reasons why they would go, to prison. But for someone to be committed to a mental institution, like for sociopathy or psychopathy, they would if they're um, so you can commit yourself to an institution, or you can be committed by a court, but you have to go before a judge and have a hearing to be committed to a mental institution against your will. So there is still legal process there. So yeah, I would say Shayna is 100% right. Like um, some people, I forget the exact stat. I want to say it's somewhere around 25% of CEOs in America have psychopathic tendencies. Not That doesn't mean that they're full blown like totally gone psychopaths, but that on the spectrum of psychopathy, they register as psychopaths. That doesn't mean they're violent. That doesn't mean they hurt people, but it just means that they fit the profile. But they're not in jail and they're not institutionalized because they haven't done anything wrong. So, uh, yeah, that's a very good point, Shayna. Melena, your question: do I think the death penalty is right? Yes. Yes, I do. I think it's right because um, it shows that life has inherent value. Um, so here's the deal: if a person murders someone else, and we give them whatever that punishment is, we give them life in prison, and let's say they get out on good behavior for 15 years. We say the person they murdered, they'll never have another day of life ever. Their life is over. But the person that did the murdering, they get to live on, and they may get to be free someday depending upon their sentencing. And so what we're saying is that person's life that you ended was worth 15 years of your life. But I think that when capital punishment is used, what we're saying is their life had inherent value and you cut that short, therefore you have forfeited your life. And that's what their life was worth. Their life was worth your life. And I think that it shows that life has value. And you can say, how can you say that? Because we're taking a life, right? But we're taking the life of someone who took an innocent person's life. They chose to end someone's life that had done nothing wrong, and they murdered somebody. They did the wrong thing, therefore they are forfeiting their life for doing that. Would be the way I would look at it. That doesn't mean you have to agree. I mean, I know a lot of people that think the death penalty is wrong, largely because of the fact that the person could be innocent. But as long as you know why you think what you think, I think that's great. Elijah, narcissistic personality disorder, something that leads to psychopathy. I don't know that narcissistic personality disorder can lead necessarily to psychopathy. I think they're just generally in the same family. Um, and generally, I mean, someone who's psychopathic is going to be narcissistic. But that doesn't necessarily mean that someone that has narcissistic personality disorder is going to be a psychopath. But they're very close. They have similar tendencies. People that have these things. Um, CEO of being a psychopath. All right, Shane, you're gonna have to help me out on that one. All right, thanks, Melena. The CEO of being a fake. So are you saying that someone could be the CEO of being a fake? Maybe you could have a business where you fake psychopathy. Anyway, side note. Oh, I get you. Okay, I get you. Okay. All right, thank you, Shayna. All right. I get you. Yeah, I'm a little slow on the draw. Things don't come across quite as well for me in written form as they do in spoken form. Uh, all right. Now let's talk about recidivism. So recidivism is falling back into crime. It's relapsing into criminal behavior, and recidivism is common. Not everyone who commits a crime is going to commit more crime when they get out of prison. Or it could just be that we don't catch them doing it, but not everyone's going to commit crime. But there is a high level of recidivism among some offenders. Uh, so people that commit, uh, I'm just going to say, so sex offenders have a very high rate of recidivism. Um, Violent criminals tend to have decently high rates of recidivism as well. So people that commit certain crimes are more likely to commit those crimes again and to get caught committing those crimes again. But not all crimes are equal as far as recidivism rates are concerned. But there is a tendency of criminals, once they commit crimes, uh, a decent percentage of criminals that are caught and prosecuted when they get out of jail or they've served their time, uh, a decent percentage of them go back into a life of crime again. Um, all right, capital punishment was the last thing on my notes. We did talk about capital punishment, and it's a hot button topic, and I understand why capital punishment is a hot button topic because I mean it's overtaking someone's life, and that we as people value or should value life, and so it's a very hard I think thing to think through of taking a life to show value of life. Which is why many states don't do capital punishment anymore, or when they do, it's in a very, very, very limited capacity. We don't see very many executions these days like we used to see. More often than not, people are put in prison for life, or serve multiple life sentences, which is basically for life. Because life isn't necessarily life, just so you know. A life sentence doesn't necessarily mean life sentence. All right, that's what I've got for you today. Any comments? Any comments or questions just to close this out? Yeah. Okay. So Elijah, that is very true. Most of us don't encounter real evil, or we don't know it when we see it. So if you talk to people that are out there that encounter evil, like most people are decent human beings for the most part. I mean, we all do things we shouldn't do, right? You know, everyone has told a lie or things like that at some point in their lives, but most people try to do good by other people. And then you have some people that may game the system, but there's a small percentage of people that are just plain are out to hurt other people or out to get what's best for them at any cost. Talk to any police officer who's been around, and they'll tell you that evil exists and that there are people who are evil, and that the only thing to do with some of these people is to lock them away or to use capital punishment. But most of us live sheltered lives. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that's why I think it's very difficult for some of us to think about capital punishment because we don't encounter real evil. All right, Alexa. Haha, that is a great question, Alexa. So here's what I think. I think bad company corrupts good character, and I think that it's not so much. I think that people who become criminals do it slowly over time, largely because of who they hang out with. I think that when they hang around the wrong people and they get into a lifestyle, like for example, a lot of people that commit theft and robbery or breaking and entering, they have a drug problem. A lot of them do. And they got into drugs probably because of those people that they hung around, right? And the people that they hang around that have a drug problem are doing the same things. And then when they get into jail, they're around a bunch of people that are really good at being criminals. And those people that are good at being criminals teach other people how to be better at being criminals in jail. And so then when they get out of jail, what are they good at? They're good at being criminals, right? That is that they did, like breaking and entering or whatever it is. So I think that recidivism is because it's what they've learned, it's what they're used to, it's what they're familiar with, and jail didn't help them at all to reacclimate to a normal life setting. Now, that's not to say that people don't get out of jail and lead a straight life, like not criminal life. I'm not saying that. I think that happens. But I think that the challenge is when they get out of jail, they're around some people. Again, they meet those friends that they hung around with, or they're making connections in jail with people that are in the same lifestyle as them. So I think it's hard to break out of that lifestyle because it's what they've learned and it's what they've known. I think it's kind of the darker side of the verse, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I think I'm not saying that it's a cycle they can't break out of, but I think it's what they've learned, so it's what they do. There's a book. I'm not recommending this book. I've not read the whole book. I've encountered excerpts from the book, and I'm not saying that you should read this. But there's a book. It's a biography. It's kind of like it's an autobiography of a very bad man named Carl Panzan, arsonist. And he kind of explains why he did what he did. It was basically that he hated people because of how he was raised, and he did a lot of bad things, but it was basically every time he would get into jail, he would pretend like he was reformed, and they would let him out, and he would go do bad things again. He'd get in jail, and he'd pretend he was reformed, and he'd go out and do bad things again. I think, Alexa, to your question, I think it's what they've learned, so it's what they do. Yeah, Shayna, I'm with you, right? Okay, Melena, let's see. What do I think about in the Old Testament? You're supposed to kill people for. Okay, whew. Now we're getting into it. Capital punishment for other things, like for example, adultery. Capital punishment in the Old Testament for adultery. Um, Capital punishment for breaking the Sabbath. So here's what I'll say. I think that Israel was it was a special example where they were a theocracy. They were the people governed by God. They were God's people, and God appointed a representative, in this case Moses, who was their intercessor to God for them. So when they're using capital punishment for these things, it's at the behest of God for them at that time. Um, that being said, I think that I'm not saying we should do this, but I think that we might have less crime. Places that have very, very strict and stringent punishments for crime often have less crime. Like there are some countries where there's a death penalty for being a drug dealer, so they don't have a whole lot of drug problems there because if you're caught dealing drugs, you're executed, and most people aren't willing to risk being executed for dealing drugs, right? Um, So while I think it might be effective at deterring crime, I think what it showed people and what Jesus says is that, yeah, though you may not do these things outwardly, you still do them inwardly, right? So just because it's against the law and you don't do them outwardly, you might still do them inwardly, right? So I don't know that I would necessarily support the death penalty for things like adultery, like in the Bible today, because we don't have a theocracy and we have people that don't believe in God or believe in Jesus that are living in our society that are not going to follow those rules. So I think it'd be very difficult to enforce. Um, but I think that it was appropriate for that people at that time. All right. Any other questions, comments? Hey, I really appreciated this today. I love the feedback and love the comments and questions. This is a great one. So keep up the good work, guys. And I'll hope to do Uh, Delpo, hey, what's up, man? All right, good seeing you. All right, so I hope to get approved for Zoom and hope to do like where I can see you and you can, because you can see me, but I can't see you. And maybe you want it that way. I don't know. But I hope to do at least one Zoom live stream a week where we can all see each other. All right. Otherwise, hey, great one today. Keep up the good work, everybody. See you soon.